Welcome to the first ever self-published DIMO podcast. We'll mostly be trying to show up on other people's podcasts, so the best way to make sure you don't miss anything is to follow us on Twitter at DIMO_network, that's DIMO_network, and turn on notifications. This is one conversation between myself and Kacy Qua, someone who has been a mentor and friend to a few of us for over a decade. We originally met in Las Vegas, where we were both working on Tony Hsieh's radical urban revitalization / community building project called the Downtown Project. Anyway, without further ado, here is my conversation with Kacy.
Okay, so I'm here with Rob Solomon, CFO of DIMO, Digital Infrastructure for Moving Objects. Upon first glance, it looks like you guys have a lot going on. All the buzzwords, IoT, user-owned, token, Web3. Can you paint me a picture of what you're building and what it's going to look like when it's done?
Yeah, not enough buzzwords, actually, in my opinion. I would love to see this kind of like Web3 IoT class emerge and become like the meme of this year. We've had like DeFi summer and NFTs exploded, and there needs to be like a DIoT or DeFiOT or something summer, for what we're building. There's a bunch of cool projects emerging that are all kind of have a bit of a common business model here, and I think it's going to become a really, really strong group of projects. But you asked what we're building. So what we're building with DIMO is a way for users, drivers, to connect their cars, stream the data from their car. They opt into how that data is shared, how that connectivity is established, and who it's established with. And on the other side of that, you have people who want to consume the data, who just might want to know about traffic in a certain city or the performance of Camrys in the Northeast or the road quality the roads are driving on, whatever it is. There's 170 different data points that our hardware device can pick up off a car, and they have all kinds of different uses in all kinds of different industries. So data consumers might want that data. We're also really excited about the idea of people building applications on top of DIMO. So because every car will have an identity, every driver will have an identity that's on chain, we can attach verifiable data to those identities. We can verify that trips happened, mint trips as NFTs, mint cars as NFTs. You'll be able to build like this long talked about Web3 version of Uber, or an insurance where you pay per mile based on how you're driving, or a more nuanced vehicle lending application, vehicle financing lending application. So you can get like a better car loan based on your on-chain driving and your car performance and other aspects about your identity. So that's at a high level what we're building, and we got a long way to go. We started this project really a couple of years ago, but after a few pivots, really got started with this type of model last fall. And the app is live now. People can connect their cars today, and we're moving along our Web3 roadmap pretty quickly.
You guys are building so many different things. It's really a lot to wrap your head around it. Can you paint me a picture of what the world looks like in a few years when Web3 is a little bit more established, and when you guys have built some of the things that you're working on now?
Yeah, definitely. On the topic of the Web3 side too, there's really two sides to what DIMO's building. One is the incentives and the token, and the other is around like the actual back end of it and how the Web3 side helps us build something that has better quality, reliability, scalability, and so on. The token's mainly about the incentive. So it's a great way to bootstrap a network quickly. We can get a lot of cars signed up, by awarding them the token, which allows us to get a big group of users. And then from there, we can get a lot of demand for the data and people building on top of it once you have a lot of users. But yeah, to your question about what it looks like in a few years, I think it gets really interesting when you think about the Web3 backbone of this and what that will do for people who are using what we're building. So I like to describe how this might look with a story of a hypothetical guy named Bob a couple of years from now. So yeah, imagine Bob is somebody who traditionally has driven for Uber or Lyft and has had a car, but he needs to get a new car, and he wants to start monetizing his data and driving in his city and picking up people for ride hailing apps and so on. So Bob comes to DIMO, he connects his Web3 identity. So without exposing any of his private information, like his social security number and his license number and his birthday and his address, he can just prove to DIMO and anybody building applications on top of it that he's licensed, that he's insured, he's a citizen, he has a TLC taxi license, so he can accept ride hail requests in this jurisdiction. So all that comes with him, and he can prove that without leaking any of his private information. The way to describe that aspect of what Web3 can do is, like, imagine you could go to a bar and prove to the bouncer you're over 21 without showing him your birthday. Like, you verifiably say, I'm 21, but not exposed.
I swear, I'm 21.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's one of the cool advances of cryptography and the composability of this stuff, is that you could come with all of your information about yourself and share only what needs to be shared, and you kind of control what's shared. and applications can take advantage of that. So Bob comes and brings all that with him, and now he needs a car, right? All right, so
The
they're
worst, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah.
I really have trauma from buying cars in my life.
Yeah, I know a lot about that. I used to work at Room selling cars online. I know a lot about that process. So at this point, a couple years from now, there's probably several apps built on top of DIMO that analyze verified car data, analyze marketplace data, so seeing how much cars are selling for and where, and more. They offer independent reviews of cars, so he's looking at all this stuff, and he decides he wants a Toyota Camry because you can see that per real verified data and how they're selling and whatnot, that they hold their value, that they're really reliable, and all that. So he goes onto this marketplace where it's like a nationwide or international auction of cars, and he can filter by, can deliver to this region and is you can register in this jurisdiction and so on. And he filters that, finds the Toyota Camry. 2 other apps have indicated this car has an A- condition rating based on the real previous owner's driving and usage history. It can tell him that it's expected to, cost about $1,200 in annual maintenance for the next 3 years. Maybe there's even another application that helps him to ensure that. So he pays some amount up front and it helps to cover his maintenance costs or whatever. And it has an above average value label stamped on it because there's he sees the current bid, and other applications know what they're selling for, and that data comes in and says, hey, this is a good price for the car based on the data, based on the region, based on all this other data. So that's a really cool auction experience. It sounds like a normal auction, like an eBay Motors or whatever, but in this case, there's nobody home. There's no company behind that. It's just like a blockchain-based protocol. And what that means is that the driver or the seller of the car gets a lot more. The buyer of the car might pay a little bit less, and you might even get better information a bit faster. The money might transfer from one person to the other faster or whatever. So
wait, so there's no suitcase with 15 grand in it that they have to sketchily carry to make the trade?
Yeah, sort of. It's the blockchain equivalent of that, but no. So it's not like a suitcase full of cash. You can put your payment into a smart contract, which will hold it there. The other person can put the ownership of the car into the smart contract and hold it there, and maybe it automatically unwinds it if both parties don't confirm that the transaction's taken place. Maybe it waits a couple of weeks, and then both the parties can agree the delivery has happened. And once they both agree, ownership of the car transfers to the buyer, the money transfers to the seller, and all that happens. Again, no one home, no lawyer in the middle, no bank, no escrow, none of that.
No trip to the DMV.
Yeah,
lines.
it's kind of done automatically, programmatically, no fee, done in real time. And if delivery doesn't happen and both sides agree delivery did not happen, then it just unwinds it automatically.
Can you guys hurry up and build that?
Yeah.
I personally dread the days where I have to go to the DMV or when I need to get car repairs. And so I'm just sort of thinking, how can this help me avoid that? Or how can that change that experience?
Yeah, we want to also put the entire DMV on the blockchain as well. So yeah, you don't have to even go in. Your car will just inspect itself, will register itself or stay registered to you, and you'll have your credentials renewed and no more DMV. And Bob's not done yet. Bob's got a lot more that he can do with DIMO for this. Let's say he needed to finance it too. Instead of having to come up with the money himself, he could go to some like DeFi lending protocol. There's lots of ways to borrow money in blockchain world, and maybe that protocol can analyze the car data, the market conditions, aspects of Bob's identity, like his creditworthiness and all that stuff, without knowing too much about him. It can just kind of know automatically what his kind of creditworthiness is and automatically generate a loan for him. And then that protocol could submit the funding on his behalf for that contract. So you could still do things like loans and kind of build all the sophisticated infrastructure that we have today, just with way fewer people in office buildings and paperwork and time delays and bureaucracy and wasted money. So
what are we going to do with all of our extra time?
Yeah, watch Netflix. I don't know. So that's the process of Bob buying a car, right? So he's done all that. The car is delivered. He confirms it. So now that he has a compatible car attached to his identity, any app developer can see, okay, he has a car. It's registered. It's insured. He has the right credentials. So therefore, like in our ride-hailing app that we created, we'll route rides to him for him to accept and drive people around. And then as he does that, we can prove the trip happened. As he gets 4 or 5-star reviews, we can attach that to his Web3 identity. We can attach reviews to the passenger's Web3 identity. Basically, everything that is Uber, you could do on top of the DIMO foundation. You could build a much leaner version, because again, like instead of a whole company, lots of people manually verifying drivers, all kinds of stuff, Uber keeping 30% of the fares, taking a week to actually get the cash from the passenger to the driver if they actually cash out, have cash in their hands, the driver not being able to take their Uber data with them and bring their rating to a different application. Like with DIMO, they could keep 99% of the fare. The driver could. They could take custody of the payment in seconds. They could take the reviews with them to different ride-hailing apps, but also like different insurance apps or lending apps. Maybe they could even go when they get their home loan, they can show like, hey, look at all my Uber driving data, and you can just kind of like, analyze my creditworthiness for a home. So those are all some of the different things that like, Bob would be doing. It'd be a little bit different from his, current Web2 experience.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So I noticed that today you have begun rewarding people who have connected their vehicles. Can you tell me a little bit about the DIMO token and what these rewards are for and how that's all going to work?
Yeah, so important distinction, the DIMO token hasn't launched yet. What we've launched today are test points, which use a similar engine to what we're thinking about for the token in terms of how they're calculated, but they're kind of a different thing, and it's kind of for developmental and test purposes for us. So talking about the idea for the token first, then we'll come back to what we've launched today. Is the idea for the token is that there'll be two types of rewards, really. One will be the baseline rewards that you get just for connecting your car, and you'll get those kind of no matter what. Over 40 years, we're going to issue 1.3 million tokens per week, and that would decrease 15% per year until the entire pool of available tokens for that is dried up after 40 years, unless it's topped up or altered by the community if they vote to change things. But that's the kind of plan right now for how those will be issued. The other are market-based rewards. So these would be as people show up and pay for user data. So if you, Casey, decide to share your data with your insurance company and they pay for that data subscription, or if Toyota wants to know how its cars are being driven and it pays for data, anonymized data across 30 million Toyotas in the US and Europe, then they could pay for that data. You would earn a proportionate amount for that. This, by the way, all this would be something that you would have opted into, and there would be a data union kind of negotiating on your behalf for the monetization of that data. So it's all opt-in. Users own their data. It's not like we're some corporation where you sign up in the beginning and we just take your data, monetize it, and just feed you ads and feed you, whatever in exchange for giving you some service. No, you're the one who owns your data and monetizes it. So you'll earn rewards for that as well. What we're planning to do is to build up the supply of drivers first before we really focus on who wants to buy the data. So we expect that the baseline rewards will be the primary driver initially, and those will go down over time as market rewards come up over time. Mm-hmm. And what we've launched now are test points, which basically look at how long you've been connected, how you're connected. So if you connect with the hardware device that we sold earlier this year, which we're about to start shipping out, you'll earn a little bit more than if you connected via software because we just get more data. We're also working on making it so you can earn more for driving an electric vehicle, but we still have some technical challenges there that we're trying to solve through. Mm-hmm. And ultimately that will determine your points balance, which we'll show you in the app now.
Great. And so people can already be racking up points now, even though you guys are just doing sort of a test run. So what is it that makes a token successful?
We're so early in the development of Web3. And it's not just because people haven't come with good ideas yet. You really gain an appreciation. You look back at like internet businesses, for example, there's so much infrastructure that had to be built for a Netflix or an Amazon to come about. Early days, Amazon just wouldn't be possible. There weren't enough people with internet connected devices. There weren't smartphones. There was dial-up. It was slow. There wasn't a great way to send, to enter your credit card into a website and have it not get picked up by somebody else. Encryption wasn't really there yet. Browsers weren't that good. Like, so much needed to be improved to make these businesses viable. And the same thing's kind of going on with Web3. So there's core infrastructure like wallets and the equivalent of browsers in the space that are starting to get a lot better. There's other applications that your application can be compatible with, but it's still early days. So for a lot of projects, including ours, you start off relatively basic in terms of the functionality, and you add more features at the same time. The apps around you that support what you're doing are adding more features. I mean, everyone building on top of the blockchain itself is improving. Like Ethereum is going through massive upgrades. It still needs to get better. It still needs to get cheaper. And so you're building up what you're doing at the same time everyone else is building up what they're doing. And the bet is that in the future, this is going to, amount to something really big. But right now it's relatively basic. So what makes a token succeed today is the community support and vision for what the token is going to do, because there's very few that are actually useful in the context of what they do. And I think if those things are in place, the tokenomics make sense, the project will continue to grow, and then hopefully find a way to actually deliver on its promises, which I'm very optimistic many of them will.
And so I think you're starting to sort of move into the direction that something that I find incredibly interesting, which is the idea of it being a user-owned network and sort of an open network. And so I would love for you to talk to me about what the benefits are of DIMO being user-owned and how that is distinct from Web2 and sort of the big corporates owning all of our data, the way that things currently are.
Yeah, you nailed it. We're definitely not trying to build the next misaligned Web2 data business, misaligned with its users. I mean, not like lost, although I guess it's kind of the same thing. The Facebook gets picked on all the time. I don't necessarily think that's entirely fair. I think they're similar to most other Web2 tech companies. And in some ways they're doing some good things, but like using them as an example, because everybody's familiar with them, they have huge misalignment with their users and their investors. I mean, they want people to come back to the site and continue to use Facebook, but to them, it's primarily about advertising and generating revenue from them rather than providing a good experience, which you would argue hopefully are correlated. Hopefully, providing a good experience and making people happy is the way to keep them engaged and make money off of them. But it's not always the case. And I'd argue a lot of times it's not the case there. But the reason you have that is because you have investors on one end who just are motivated by profit. And then you have the users and stakeholders on the other end who have different incentives, and they're kind of at odds with each other, and they optimize their application to serve the investors. In the traditional model for building companies, right, you raise external capital from VCs, and then you take $5-10 a person to try to recruit people onto your service. That's your customer acquisition costs, a lot of marketing. You're giving away a lot of the company early on to investors at low valuations, and you're just burning through cash trying to get people to care about what you're doing. And they'll come on, and if you're lucky, they'll do some things, and it's unlikely they'll really care all that much. If a competitor comes along, they're not very loyal. I loved Uber, but when Lyft came around and offered cheaper prices, I would switch to that. In New York, we had a couple others pop up like Juno or whatever. I just switched to whichever one's the cheapest. They have no real loyalty to the ride sharing program, even though they spent a good amount of money to get me on there in the first place. And what you end up with after all of that is a company that's given away the majority of its ownership to investors to get a lot of cash, to burn a lot of it on marketing, which doesn't really help anybody, to get users who are a bit fickle and ready to leave it, for the next best thing, versus giving ownership directly to the users instead of the investors, and helping them kind of come along for the ride and control what's going on, building more loyalty, more community around the project, and ultimately ending up with a much more aligned ecosystem where you don't have this huge investor class on one side and the user class on the other side, and they have completely different incentives. Primarily, what we're trying to do with DIMO is build it as user owned, like you mentioned, such that the stakeholders are the users. That it's kind of one group. It's almost like a co-op, or it's like the Green Bay Packers. Like they're owned by their fans more or less. There's not, it makes subtle differences. It's not like they're a completely different style of football team, but like the odds of them moving out of the town or being hostile with their community or what, like it doesn't make as much sense. They're much more aligned with the community, right? As a football team. That's a weird example to give, but
are they a user-owned football team? I didn't know that.
They kind of are. Yeah, I think they're like the only football team where individual people can buy shares in the team. I'm not sure exactly what their corporate structure is, but they are definitely more aligned than a lot of other teams. Just ask the fine folks of St. Louis who are suing the owner of the Rams who ripped the team out of there, who allegedly defaulted on some like stadium agreement they had or whatever. So yeah, we want the drivers, we want the application developers, we want the hardware manufacturers, the data consumers to be the ones who have the say in how the network is used, as both the people who want it to succeed for maybe economic reasons or, because their own businesses are built on top of it, but also for their own personal reasons as users of it. And we think that's going to be a subtle yet really important distinction in the incentives and design of these types of systems.
It's you use the analogy of a city, and I have heard the whole team sort of refer to this idea of DIMO city. Can you explore what that looks like and sort of what that vision is for DIMO city?
Yeah, we're not actually building a real physical city like Mark Lohr in the desert. I think that's super fascinating. I'd love to visit it once it's even partly built. I have a soft spot for that after working on the downtown project in Las Vegas. But no, we're building a digital city, right? So the idea is DIMO wants to be this open, neutral, credible, scalable protocol platform on which you can build applications and build businesses on top of. Much the same way that a city is a fair, open, at least in the US, and I'm sitting in New York City, I'm looking out the window here. You can own land here. There's a protocol for living here, and it is user owned. Like the people of New York vote in New York elections, which determine New York local law. Now there's also state and federal law. Ignore that for a second. But there's property rights in the city, and you can come in here and you can build a building and trust that it's going to be, you're going to continue to own it, and no one's going to kind of pull the rug out from underneath you, and you can build your businesses here and kind of move in. Like compare that to if you were going to build an app on, like you saw this actually with like Twitter clients. You used to be able to use like Tweetbot and stuff, and then Twitter revokes a lot of the APIs. Or Facebook, you build Farmville on top of Facebook, and then they go to battle with you and try to renegotiate the deal. There was a famous case recently where there was somebody with the Meta username on Instagram, And when Facebook did its rebrand, it just took that away from that person. So it gave it back because of the backlash, but that tells you everything. Like, you don't own your livelihood and your identity and whatnot when you're on these other platforms. You're renting. With DIMO, we want people to own. So we use the analogy of the city. Right now, we're building the plumbing, the infrastructure, the roads. Like, would you rather live in a city where the people in a city vote on local politics, or the people in a different city vote on your city's local politics? Right? It's like it's a minor difference, but you want to have all the incentives aligned as much as you possibly can. And we're going to turn over control of the city to the residents, basically. And from there, we want people to start to build buildings and businesses and move in.
Organizations look incredibly different in Web 2 and Web 3. Can you talk at all about sort of the cultural differences that you notice sort of in the Discord or within the community versus what you might experience in a so-called traditional company?
Yeah. The biggest difference is that the line between someone who's on the inside building it and a fan on the outside just consuming it is blurred so much more in these types of projects, which I absolutely love. I hate that distinction. I hate that with Apple or Spotify. If I want to build something cool that adds on to some capability that they already have, that I can't just like do that without becoming an employee and wading through their bureaucracy. Or a lot of times products, they try to have like their developer SDKs and APIs, but they're really limited. I love that we're building something where it's not just like we're giving you this one API that you can use if you want to build something on top. So you can fundamentally join in and help to steer where this is going, provide real-time feedback, see what we're talking about, see what we're working on, chime in. We're really trying to blur the line as much as we possibly can here. And there's been real benefits to that. I mean, our users, in addition to owning like every type of car in pretty much every region in our community, which is just helpful from like a testing standpoint and a feedback standpoint.
Hopefully. Very cool. I've heard your team talk a bit about vehicles having a wallet or a glove box. And I'm curious, what goes in that wallet and how can that make my life easier?
Yeah. So with the blockchain space, there's everybody or most people kind of know that you can send like tokens back and forth, and there's like a transactional element to it. You think of a wallet like something you put money in, take money out, but like an actual wallet that you keep in your pocket, there's more than just money in there. There's like your driver's license and your membership card to your gym, or key card that gets you into your building or something like that. So there's all these things that you can add to a wallet that go beyond just something you can transact with. And we want to build for our users kind of a wallet for them, so that stores like their insurance, their registration, information about themselves. If they have a motorcycle license, TLC, taxi license, if they're other things kind of about what they're qualified to do and what they've done, whether it's purely for commercial reasons like a license, or just social reasons like you've driven across the country, you've driven in all 50 states, and you can have like that part of your trophy case. So we want to have that on the individual level. Same thing on the car level. Like, this car is insured, this car is eligible to be used for ride sharing. It's like a nice enough, new enough car that it can be used to pick people up and move them around inside the city, or it is what it says it is. We've confirmed that this is a 2016 Honda Civic, and attach that identity information to the vehicles as well. And I guess I'll go off on a slight tangent here. Is one of the coolest things that gets me really excited about blockchain generally is that's the data that we'll kind of generate and use. But all of these primitives are completely portable everywhere else. So you could be driving with DIMO and generating all this data about you in your car that could be used by an entirely different application. Maybe someone wants to give you a home loan and it wants to look at your data about your ride hailing trips that you did and to learn more about your income and what you've done there and your reviews. Or if you want to move from one app to another, you can bring all this data with you. So it's all completely composable across different Web3 platforms. And so that's kind of where we're going to be generating data for folks, but people might have other data that they bring with them and pair with their DIMO data for other uses.
They're starting lawn mowing and like yard work outside my house. So I think I've kept trying to mute it, but that might have.
I don't hear any of it on this end.
Oh, all right. It's super loud here. Okay.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Kacy. Hopefully you're just as fired up about DIMO and the implications of these new Web3 business models as we are. But even if you only find yourself somewhat intrigued, pop open your web browser and punch in dimo.zone. That's DIMO.zone, or download the app by searching DIMO Mobile on iPhone or Android and connect your car. Because worst case, there's no harm. Best case, you'll be part of something truly massive, and I'm betting on the latter. So please give this podcast a thumbs up on whatever platform you listened on, and don't forget to send to your friends. Thanks so much. Goodbye, everybody.